I'm a sucker for a well-designed living room, and I recently found five that I cannot stop thinking about. So today I want to break down exactly why they work, what makes them so special, and the design secrets that you can steal for your own space. And trust me when I tell you the last one is worth sticking around for. This first room shows us how we can subvert design expectation without it feeling gimmicky. If you watched my Studio Mickey reaction video, then you already know that I am no stranger to a beautifully wallpapered ceiling. But this room gets it so right that I really needed to understand why. So using wallpaper on the ceiling completely flips design tradition on its head, and it can make a really powerful and dramatic statement, and this room is no exception. It's giving you an instant wow factor when you walk in, but it's also bringing the ceiling down, making the entire room feel more intimate. It's almost like walking into a jewelry box. This deep, moody green with touches of pink ties into the other colors in the room, so it makes it all feel really cohesive. And I think the reason it is so impactful in this space is because the other elements in the room, I'm looking at the fireplace, the built-ins, the chandelier. They're all really traditional in style. So it's kind of balancing out that creative risk that we take with the ceiling and giving a satisfying mix of old world charm and artistic flair. And the designer has mirrored that in the rest of the room as well, because the design is overall pretty restrained. We've got simple white walls, clean lines on that mirror, and a solid neutral rug. So this bold ceiling works so well because everything else in the space is either working to balance it or support it. Okay, let's take this rug for example. If we swap it out for a more ornate rug, even if we pick one that goes with the wallpaper, the room immediately becomes kind of overwhelming and heavy because our eye is being pulled in too many directions and we don't know where to look. And so picking a simple rug lets the ceiling have its moment without having to compete with other elements in the room. But not everything is just a blank white canvas. There are some things here that are supporting the ceiling. Like this olive green velvet sofa doesn't just echo the color of the ceiling, it actually deepens it by bringing in a visual interest through texture. And these subtle moments of pattern in the pillows and the fireplace surround are adding playful, unexpected details while making sure that the ceiling isn't the only visually interesting thing in the space. Because if it was, the ceiling would be the only thing we look at and then the rest of the room would fall completely flat. So these other moments of visual interest get to be in conversation with the ceiling, which makes all of it work together and flow really nicely. The other really smart thing that they've done here is the use of this mirror above the fireplace. Because what that mirror is doing for us is it's reflecting the wallpaper, which is then giving our eye a clear path of travel from the ceiling down to the rest of the room. And the right piece of art could do the same thing, but it also runs the risk of pulling attention from the ceiling. So I think this mirror is a really great choice. It bridges the gap for us without introducing another visually heavy element. And finally, the plants in this room. The plants that are in the corner and on the mantle are working hard because they're reinforcing the organic botanical theme of that wallpaper. And they're adding a little bit of life, a little bit of movement, which is going to help keep this really traditional room from feeling too stagnant. This room is incredible, but if I were going to tweak just one thing, personally, I would add a low sculptural coffee table or ottoman right in front of the couch. Here's why. Right now, that seating area feels a bit like it's floating. So the sofa is beautiful, but I think that adding a small table is going to help anchor it visually, add another layer of shape and dimension without overwhelming the design. I'm going to go with this one, which is going to echo the shape of that ceiling medallion above it and bring some warm wood tones in to balance the room. Because balance is the name of the game in this room. Bold design choices work best when the rest of the room is in on the plan. So if you go for a really big, bold statement in one area, make sure that it's supported by areas of restraint. And quietly echo that statement through color or texture or pattern elsewhere in the room so that everything feels really cohesive. Okay, I love this next living room because the design feels so accessible. It feels like a room that I could literally walk into in a friend's house today and not feel at all intimidated by the design. It's got this kind of effortlessly chic and stylish energy. I feel like this is one of those rooms where you feel the vibe of the room before you actually notice the design, and that is its magic. The color story in this room is vibrant and it's playful, but it's also really balanced. We are using all three primary colors, that is red, yellow, and blue, which could so easily feel like a crayon box exploded on you. But what keeps it from being too visually overwhelming is that the shades and tones here are nuanced, right? It's not bright red, it's dusty pink and deep magenta. It's not a true blue, it's a faded washed denim. And it's not like yellow, it's mustard curtains, it's amber glass, and it's raw birchwood frames. And that nuance really elevates the palette and keeps it feeling chic and sophisticated. And then that color palette is reinforced by layers of pattern and texture and art. I'm looking at the rug, the pillows, the ottoman, the tapestry, and the many collected objects throughout the room. All of them support the color palette and give it some sense of depth. And then we have to talk about the use of plants in this room. Because here's the thing, plants are always a good idea, but the way this room uses plants is as art. So we have hanging plants in the windows in between each curtain, making symmetry, making a statement. And then we have this tall sculptural floor plant that's drawing the eye up. And on the right, this is maybe my favorite use of a plant that I've ever seen because it is literally being used as a wall sculpture. I think everyone should steal this idea today. I feel like hanging a bushy trailing plant on your wall like it's a sculpture, like it's a piece of art, will just instantly make your space cooler. So the plants here are really serving as art. They're adding visual interest without weight or clutter, and they're also really softening the edges of the room. But really, I think the thing that makes this room so special and so practical and so inviting is the layout. This big L-shaped sectional paired with the two lounge chairs creates like a laid back conversation space that feels inviting. Like it doesn't feel fussy at all. And then that circular coffee table in the center, I've talked about this before, but this circular coffee table is going to keep the flow organic and make moving around the space easy. I really don't think any other design elements in this room would make as big of an impact if it wasn't for the overall footprint of the space that feels like it's really designed with community and connection at the heart of it. And that's why I think the key takeaway for this room for me is to build your space to serve you first. Build your layout with connection in mind, and then let the rest of the design elements just kind of fall in after. This room reminds me of a quote that's been floating around like fashion TikTok for a minute, and I don't know the source because I am merely a consumer. But the quote is,
if an outfit's not interesting through color, then it has to be interesting through shape. And if it's not interesting by shape, then it has to be interesting through texture. And if it's not interesting by texture, then it has to be interesting by color.
Essentially naming color, shape, and texture as the three foundational building blocks of artistic interest. And this room is essentially devoid of color. I think that a lot of people would argue that brown is a color, and they are correct, but for the sake of analysis, we're going to categorize it as a neutral. And neutrals are colors, and colors are neutrals, and there are no rules. But for this moment, we're going to say that this room is devoid of color. And in this room, it is the absence of color and the presence of texture and shape that make it so visually powerful. So I want to explore it through that lens, starting with the complete lack of color and pattern. The entire palette here is soft, warm, tonal, which gives this kind of instant sense of calmness and stillness, but it's still so beautiful to look at. We have ivory, beige, taupe, camel, cocoa, and small touches of charcoal. So the color story here is an exercise in holding back. And that restraint, that lack of color, allows our eyes to rest on the most visually interesting thing in this room. The texture. Texture is absolutely the star of this room, and every element plays with it in some way. The boucle couch, the ribbed wood paneling, the two marble tables, which are both so beautiful, oh my gosh. The shaggy wool rug, the velvet side chair, and the limestone wall treatment, right? All their own unique textures. And each element is bringing in both visual and tactile interest, which makes the room feel layered and interesting even without color. And then all of that beautiful texture is framed by the third element, shape. And for me, it is the use of shape and proportion that makes this room so special. This low horizontal wall paneling with nothing above it sinks the eye down a little further than we expect, which really concentrates all of our attention on that seating area. And then that's reinforced with this low, deep seating that makes everything feel very low to the ground in an artistic way. But then we have these really interesting architectural shapes, which are actually my favorite part of the room. Look at the coffee table, the lamp, the chair frame, and the sculpture next to the couch. They give this quiet interest to the room. And then the styling on the ledge above the paneling is helping to kind of soften that hard edge between the paneling and the wall treatment. It blends them together so the transition doesn't feel so abrupt. So shape here is a supporting player to texture. It might not be the thing that draws your eye, but it puts a frame around it that makes the whole thing make sense. Think of it like a piece of art, right? Texture is the painting, and it's one thing to look at a beautiful painting on a wall. It is another thing entirely to look at that painting in a beautiful frame. Your eye's not looking at the frame necessarily, but it's shaping your experience. So in this room, texture is the painting, shape is the frame. So I think this room really teaches us that restraint isn't about doing things less or doing less things. It's about making the right things louder. Okay, this next room shows us that there truly is a method to the madness when it comes to mixing print and pattern, and I have rarely seen it done so well. And I'm not normally a big mixed print fan, but this room does it in a way that feels simultaneously grounded and adventurous. So we absolutely need to talk about how and why it works, because this is not easy to do. So the first reason I think it feels so cohesive is because all of the elements have a similar visual weight and saturation. So even though we have several different types of patterns, the orange in the gingham is just as vivid as the teal in the chair frames, and is just as deep as the green on the fireplace, and is just as saturated as the red frame on the art, and so on and so on. So no single element feels washed out or overpowering compared to the others. And they've strategically chosen things that make less visual noise to serve as a neutral backdrop, right? The neutral colored walls, the white fireplace and coffee table, and the woven window treatments, they're all taking a step back to let the bold patterns in the furniture take center stage without having to fight for attention, similar to what we saw in the first room. We also have different types and scales of patterns here. So we have geometric patterns like gingham and stripes. We have organic patterns like the floral pillows. We have abstract pattern like the folk art above the fireplace. And we have texture-based pattern in the window treatments and the lampshade. And not only do we have different types, but we also have different scales. So we have patterns that are small, medium, and large. So a variety of scale helps keep the eye moving without creating chaos. And a variety in type helps create depth and balance because no one type feels too dominant. So just to break this room down, we have a small geometric pattern in the gingham, a medium geometric pattern in the fireplace tile, and then large geometric stripes on the walls. Then we have a large organic pattern on the pillows and a small organic pattern on the curtains, a small natural pattern in the bamboo shades, and a medium natural pattern in the I can never say this freaking word, rattan, in the rattan chairs. But then even with so much variety, they've used strategic repetition to create cohesion and a visual rhythm in the room. I see that repetition in this moody green that's used not only in the art, but on the fireplace and in the curtains. I see it in the saturated teal chairs that repeat in a circle around the coffee table, and in the way that the gingham and floral are both repeated on different chairs. And so this repetition is going to tell your brain like these things belong together. So your eye doesn't interpret each pattern as a totally different statement. Okay, so to recap, here are the tips to level up your print mixing game if print mixing is a game that you want to play. First, you're going to vary the size, scale, and type of your patterns, but you're going to keep a consistent color intensity so that no one pattern feels overpowered or washed out. Then you're going to repeat at least one standout element throughout the room to create cohesion and rhythm and visual flow. And finally, you're going to layer in natural textures like woven shades, wood furniture, or lots of plants to make your print mixing feel grounded instead of chaotic. Oh my God, I literally have not been able to stop thinking about this last room since I first saw it. Okay, this last room is kind of a rebel, and I kind of love it for that. So this is the home of visual artist Robert Montgomery and poet and filmmaker Greta Ballamacina. And to say that this home has challenged my own sense of identity as related to interior design is an understatement. Because on paper, this room is super not my vibe. On paper, I hate this room. I personally gravitate towards much more simple and restrained design. And I have a history of just kind of getting overwhelmed quickly by maximalist aesthetics. But something about this room just completely lit my brain up. And frankly, it kind of moved me, like in a way that only really good art can. And I think that is the root here, is that this is not just a well-designed room. We saw a lot of well-designed rooms today. This is art. This is true art that uses the walls as a canvas. And because of that, I personally don't think we need to spend a lot of time analyzing the technical elements of this room. For this room, I want to talk about breaking the rules. Look at all of the rules being broken in this room. Look at the walls. These walls are literally color blocked. The walls are painted a very light blue, which you're gonna be able to see a little more clearly in the next photo. And then the molding is painted gold, and the interior of the molding is painted this kind of dusty peach. And the thing I find most striking about it is that these are not people who like went down to Sherwin-Williams and picked their paint swatches. For a lot of their house, they just mixed their own paint using whatever they had lying around until they liked the color enough to put it on the walls. Literally using the walls as a canvas. They talk about specifically this dusty pink lime wash being something that they just kind of threw together out of colors they had in the studio. And then look at the top of the walls, right? In the space between the trim, they've created what looks like plaster molds of Latin words. It says something to the effect of art, work, love, life, art, or craft and art. It's like live, laugh, love, but leveled way up. And they're breaking smaller rules too, like this portrait that's hung upside down, or the bright yellow poof that feels completely out of place. And then from this angle, look at the way that the art piece isn't centered in the frame, or the asymmetry of these plaster casts above the trim. Also, this tiny gold disco ball in the window that's like held up by this bright pink ribbon. This is a family who is not interested in playing by the rules. And the result is irreverent and confronting in the best way. And so this photo is actually the one that got me really interested in learning more about this home, which, by the way, the entire home is beautiful. I'll link to the Home and Garden article below. It's worth seeing. But in this photo, I love how just defiant this whole vignette is with the art and the ottoman and the disco ball. But I also really love how even though there is so much going on in this room and there is so much that I'm drawn to, in this photo, my eyes go completely and immediately to the painting on the back wall that I find so captivating. And I love the way that the color blocking on the walls has just created sort of layers of frames. So this isn't just a piece of art, it's like art inside of art, surrounded by art, on top of art, next to art. It's art several layers deep. And so I think if there's a tangible and actionable takeaway from this room, it's like, hey, don't play by the rules, man. Break every single one. Think of rules as training wheels. Once you learn to ride, ditch them. Let your space move you. Let it challenge you. Let it be art. I am dying to know if this room pushes you the way that it pushes me. Please let me know in the comments if it is pushing you or challenging you or getting under your skin the way that it got under mine, or if I've completely lost the plot. I think that these 5 living rooms prove that great design isn't actually about style. It's about bold, intentional choices that let your personality shine through. Design is personal because design is art. And if you are like me and cannot stop thinking about that wallpaper ceiling, then go check out that Studio McGee video because there is more where that came from. Just click the link on screen and I'll meet you there.